Thank you for staying with us. The next conversation is around, as you've seen in the welcoming slide, first of all, let's ask a few questions of ourselves this morning. Why do we have dwindling resources and meager income? Of course, the challenge remains, as so many people have spoken about over time. Let's just go straight into it because, you know, in 2017, there was this book launched. I don't know if you're aware of it. Title of the book, From Consumption to Production. It was actually launched by the Vice President. And it was by one of the assistants, special assistants to the president of the AFDB, Professor and I find that book very, very intriguing. And I thought, and so many people have spoken about the need for us to be a producing nation and not a consuming nation. Otherwise, we will continue to be in the throes of lack of resources to take care of the issues that we need to take care of. Let's just get into the conversation this morning with three gentlemen joining us this morning. Buka Kyari is a former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, and he is also Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of INLAX. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Ayo.
We also have Monday Ashibogu, who is former spokesperson for National Association of Small and Monday Michaels Ashibogu, yes, who is former spokesperson for National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises, NASME. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we also have with us Richard Mark Mbaram, who is an international development practitioner. He joined us virtually from Abuja. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Mbaram.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, let me begin with you, Mr. Kyari. Over time, that conversation has been spoken about over and over again. There are those who benchmark Nigeria against China, that some 40 years ago we were at par. I think maybe they started a sprint and we began a marathon. So I don't know, what's your take on all of this consumption to production conversation that we've been having for several years?
I think there are some fundamental questions that we need to ask ourselves when it comes to development in general. You know, there is something that people talk about, economic growth versus what I call production-based, job-creating, growth. You can do the numbers. You know, there was a period of time not very long ago where we had anywhere from 7 to 10% GDP growth consistently for about 7 to 10 years. It didn't do much to the living standards, and that wasn't inclusive. When you want to transform your economy, you have to make some tough decisions. One of those is to fundamentally look inwards. The small, medium enterprises concentration, light industries production, it's some basic things that we ordinarily import should be, produced locally. It creates jobs, money flows through the economy, enhances productivity. It may be tough, globally speaking, because you are going to semi-isolate your economy, so to speak. We have the demographics. India did that in the early 80s. China, to a certain extent. In the case of China, it was a complete paradigm shift from their communist-based economy to more market-driven. And they didn't jump into it a la the prescription of World Bank and the rest. They did it the Chinese way, and it had, over one generation, over a period of 30 years, took over 600 million people out of poverty. So we need to look at those, and then we need to have a disciplined execution of that strategy. Doesn't matter which party comes into power, there is a framework that you have to work within those boundaries, and we consistently do those things. It's not sexy, by the way. You don't see it. It's not sexy. It's tough, hard work.
Mr. Buka,
Yeah.
while all of that is admirable, this thinking you are talking about, I believe it is not new. We have had how many national development programs? Or what do we call it? Is it rolling plans?
Yes.
Over the decades, even pre-independence. We had the first national development plan, second national development plan, and all those ones. So is it that those things didn't factor in some of these things that you're talking about?
Those things, yeah, those things have put us in actually, you know, hindsight, we realized that they were good. If you plan for 5 years, it's great. But you have to be consistent with the plan. You don't keep changing the plans, you know, to satisfy the needs of a minister or a president or whatever. It is consistent. You say this is the philosophy.
So that's
we
what
need to invest in education, healthcare, road networks, whatever. And by the way, a nation's productivity is directly correlated to the quality of education and skills, technical skills you give.
Okay. In this country, I am not a spring chicken. So I witnessed this country produce cars, produce tires, produce textile, produce food. We had the most delicious biscuits, and they were made in this country. All those things were made in Nigeria. In fact, we should have put proudly made in Nigeria.
Well, maybe we weren't proud at the time.
We were very proud. We were very, I can assure you. So what went wrong? Please. All those factories are now shut down. We had pan in Nigeria. Most of the components of those cars were made in this country. We had Steyr. Most of those Barrack batteries died. What happened to us?
You see, Dr. Booker just made a statement that, you know, your production capacity should be correlated with education. Once there's a deficit in that, you are going to have issues like this. One of the fundamental issues you get is that you have skill sets deficits. Capacity, human resource capacity is not in correlation to your production capacity. That's one of the things you get.
Is that rocket science?
It's not.
We have professors in university, eggheads. Let them sit down and work out a new curriculum.
Working out a curriculum do not just end there, because education actually has, the basis of every education in the world is to provide solutions to problems. Yes. That is the basis, irrespective of the discipline you read in school. It's to provide solutions to problems. And if you cannot provide solutions to the problems, you become the problem.
The question she asked, and I would like you to speak, just a second, I'd like you to speak directly to it, because it apes what Dr. Fuka said the other time about the importance of MSMEs in the mix. So she spoke specifically about some industries and some products. Cars. How many industries serves the automobile industry?
Oh dear.
Thousands, hundreds.
As in industries that feed
Cluster.
the automobile industry.
In fact, the way we did them was wrong. When you are manufacturing cars, you don't start from manufacturing cars. You start from manufacturing spare parts.
We're coming, I'm just saying that, you know, so those businesses that feed the automobile industry are the micro, small, and medium enterprises. Biscuits were not made by oil majors. They were definitely made by micro, worst case, medium enterprises. So to speak to her question specifically, what went wrong?
Okay, I'll tell you what went wrong. I think we focused more on regulation and policy making.
Thank you.
Than actually dealing with issues of implementation. And I will say this, you know, in a system where you find people comfortable to go to public service than stay in private practice, then you have a problem. It means that the driver of the process is now governance rather than private sector production. And once you have that...
Please, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
When I left university, Nobody wanted to work in the civil service. We all were looking for jobs in the private sector.
But today, it is actually the most lucrative place to be in, government.
So
And
what happened there again?
okay, that's why I said when you put more focus on regulation and governance, right, rather than private sector production, that's what happens. You will have more people going into the system to become regulators, and they will muzzle out, and they will also be in competition with the private sector. In some states, you have more than 25 regulatory agencies dealing with one private sector operator. And for a small business person, I think survival is out of the question.
Right.
Oh,
A
gosh.
state in question today now, you have to pay for vehicles parked just right outside your premises with some outrageous billings. Now, when you look at these issues, they come in bits.
Multiple taxation.
Now, when you put this, apart from multiple taxation, you have a system that collapses over a period of time because you do not take the pains of expanding the capacity of such infrastructure. Quality infrastructure is also a determinant of production. You have a power sector that did not improve in the last 25 years or 30 years or 40 years. You have a framework that you keep constructing. I had a challenge with someone here who was trying to prove me wrong about the road construction. This is Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. For 25 years, it's been under one form of construction or the other. The same across the country for all major routes, within states, local governments, and at the national level. Now, when you have these things ongoing, and you cannot account for any type of productivity coming out of it, how many man hours do you waste on the road trying to get an 8 to 5 job? Now, when you look at this over time consistently, you begin to depreciate the resources you have. And those in private sector cannot latch on to the infrastructure that's available. You have this deficit. Now, if you have a power framework that was doing 4,000 megawatts, and you have a market demand for 50,000 megawatts, and you are even grappling with trying to get 4,000 to be at a steady cost. Now, there are people already in deficit, and those who are already latched to that other process are already having issues. We have a gas plant. We have a renewable energy plant. We have a lot of money in circulation, and yet, when it gets to the hands of certain persons, so the thing is, the issue is about capacity between governance and private sector production. Okay. So over time, there has been a depreciation. And once there are certain frameworks that you need to put in place. Quality assurance in terms of infrastructure. Do you have the quality infrastructure on energy? Do you have that enables production capacity? And then what about the skill sets that will run that system? If you don't have them in place, you will continue to churn out even graduates who will have no place to work.
Unemployable.
So you put out a recruitment exercise for an organization as immigration, and you have a stadium filled up with people, and there's a stampede that people died. Is that not a cause for reflection? If you were doing that for a factory.
Just a moment. That calls for concern, and it's a question I would like to ask you, Mr. Dr. Booker. But let me see if we have a guest, joining us virtually on set now. Okay, I understand that he's not ready yet. So the issue that he just raised now, and also goes to what Alera said earlier about young people when she was growing up preferring the private sector to the public sector. The NYSC system, Dr. Booker, why are you laughing? The NYSC system is such that one of the objectives of the NYSC is to raise entrepreneurs, to make the graduate, position the graduate in such a way that when you leave the camp or stop doing whatever it is that you're doing in any of these places that you're serving, you should be able to stand on your own. Start a small business by yourself.
Yes.
But it would seem like from what he has just said now, a stadium packed with people, and all of a sudden, they would rather get a job for 10 jobs meant for 10 people. We have 50,000 people wanting to get that job. I understand. Just a second. Just chew on it for a bit. Mr. Mbaram, thanks for joining us this morning. Well, you've heard the conversation begin and all of that. And I know that, there is some background that perhaps people need to have about this whole challenge we have about Nigeria's development prowess or a lack of it. What's your take? Perhaps we want to begin if there is such a thing as a competitive advantage that we have lost steam on over time.
Yes, thank you very much. Without a doubt, Nigeria has profound, productive competencies. Whether you want to look at from primary production to, secondary or tertiary production, Nigeria is really, really seething with potentials. But we don't, of course, eat potentials. You want to look at how the country evolved right from our colonial, experience. The country had really developed its agricultural sector and was focused, though, on exporting primary produce, and generating income therefrom. But as at the point of independence, it became clear to leadership that we needed to expand our industrial competency. But it was done in a manner that became a bit of a challenge because we did not have the human resource base, that could really fuel a leapfrogging into the industrial ecosystem as had been contrived at inception. But what has been lacking largely, and I want to key into the conversation that other panelists have been having hitherto, is a level of sincere understanding of what the need is, and an adherence to a clearly laid out plan over a long period of time. The Chinese experience that you had referred to, or you want to look at the Indian one, if you want to also pick up the Brazilian instance, it is hinged on a long-term implementation of a strategy or a plan, a national plan, which basically would, ordinarily incorporate mistakes and learnings therefrom. And then you basically, you're now able to rework or refashion your strategy to suit your existential needs on the ground. There's no point playing to the gallery, ordinarily, because that would end up playing out in the sense of you having a profound failure failure attaching to your plan. And that's clear from Nigeria's experience. Whatever you want to say, however you want to permutate, the fact remains that we have failed. The evidences are everywhere. So if you want to recalibrate, you want to be sincere about the mistakes that have been made over time. You want to appreciate the fact that you have expended profound resources to put up white elephant projects in the name of industrial, enclaves. You have not supported, the private sector and provided it with the necessary, backbone to be.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Well, we have to get you back because you touched on a sore point there. Where we ought to have begun. The competitive advantage part, you have to come back to talk to us about it. But back to that question, Dr. Bukar.
Can I highlight something?
Okay, please.
There is a larger conversation that we need to be making as a nation. When it comes to that developmental production-related growth, there are 5 key things that need to be in place. One is called accumulation. I believe it's a World Bank document. Accumulation, innovation, allocation, stabilization, and inclusion. 5 pillars. Accumulation simply means that we need to invest in those basic things I've mentioned earlier: education, health, skill development, training people to be employable, and all of that. It should be done purposely, not just haphazardly. On the innovation side, it's not about everybody has to be a rocket scientist. No, it's just finding new ways of doing things. It should be policy driven, policy of innovation that actually is grounded in some framework whereby it's encouraged, incentivized, and we grow. Allocation means that we don't have infinite capital. We have scarce capital. They should be channeled to those productive sectors, not consumptive, a la Prof's book. Now, when you have done all of those, you need to have a stabilization effect. You can talk about security, you can talk about rule of law, whatever. And then at the end of the day, is that rising water lifting all boats, or is it excluding certain classes? So you make to have policy that raises all of us. Because if you begin to neglect certain sectors or regions, you will end up destroying everything, because you have neglected certain regions or certain sectors or certain aspects of humanity within the country. So those 5 pillars, if done purposely, done with policies that are going to enshrine growth, then we will see what I call productivity or production-based job creating economic growth possible.
Dr. Carey, I beg to stay with you. You were chairman of the Economic Summit Group, and it was my belief that government listened to you, to the Summit Group.
We can have another debate about that, but that's...
That already answered my question. But I was going to ask you, the things that he spoke about earlier, about 25 agencies dealing with just one industry. I mean,
one company.
One company.
One company, sorry. Yes. I'm sure you all saw this, and there would have been things that you would have discussed at your summits. Did you advise government about it? What was their reaction regarding what it was doing and how it was killing industry in this country?
So we knew what we were doing. We knew that policy recommendations that you give government, they don't adopt everything lock, stock, and barrel. They may conveniently pick, 2 or 3 out of the 10 recommendations or whatever. But now, as a think tank, as a policy think tank on enhancing the economy, private sector driven, we will continue to make those recommendations. It may not be always rosy relationship with government. In some instances, NESG, and I'm not speaking for NESG now, but generally speaking, NESG may make the recommendations and government may decide not to adopt it. However, as time goes on, they see the wisdom, they come around to it. The idea of privatization was first given birth to at the first or second summit. And NESG has been having that summit for the last 27 years. So essentially, it's a life journey. And we believe that Nigeria is a work in process, because a nation is a continuum. We may get the right leaders, we may get bad leaders, but we have to continually make the right recommendations on policies that would uplift the lives of everybody. And that is actually the duty of every citizen. It doesn't have to be an ESG doing that. It is all of us.
Well, I remember Mr. Ashibogu, the AFDB president, said some months ago, even if it's up to a year, that it is cheaper to import into Ghana than it is to Nigeria, given reasons such that cost some thousands of dollars as opposed to, Ghana and all of that. And he said that it's part of the reason why importation costs are high here, such that there is nothing to take out of the country, so to speak. So you both, the three of you actually, have spoken about the limitations, the leads that we have. We have some good enough time to talk about what we need to do long term. One of the questions posted to Dr. Buka the other time is that of long-term planning. And Mr. Mbaram has also spoken to the fact that we need to have a long-term plan. So if we're going to have a long-term plan, if you would suggest that as well, and we have an 8-year term for each government, federal or state, how do we sustain it?
Well, it's always convenient anywhere in the world to give superficial solutions to problems. And that has always been the issue. Now, whether the person is going to be there for 8 years or 20 years, for as long as the system provides for policy swings, you will not have any sustainable economic development.
Does the system provide for policy swings?
Of course, yes.
How?
The system enables policy leaders to suspend another policy midway and start off with another one. You could even jettison a policy. I've heard some governors say to people that is the project of his predecessor and he's not going to touch it. And there's nothing that can be done about it. And you're talking about millions of dollars in terms of investment. I have seen the federal government invest in a gas processing zone, and an individual has held us to ransom after people have deployed about $300 million into that industrial farm. It happened in Delta. It's happened in Rivers. It's happened in Kano. This is not at national level, we're talking at state levels, at local government levels. So the thing is, if policy drivers can truncate a process midway, and there is no guarantee for even arbitration or for a legal redress that can be resolved within a time frame, an investor could recoup his money. PI&D and all these scandals that came with it is as a result of such issues. Someone wakes up overnight, introduces a policy midway where there's an existing policy. Because we like to work in silos. And the problem is, it's not about who is going to be there for 8 years. We must define, if you have a roadmap, this is first industrial plan, it was reviewed. That's why you had the second one. We have even the economic recovery and growth network.
Right.
It's one thing to grow, and it's another to develop. So you could say the economy is growing, and the money is going out. Today we have a lot of FDI coming into the fintech sector, but the profit is not staying here. So you have just few individuals, but a lot of money running in the process. And then you can account for GDP growth, but it will not trickle down to the average Nigerian's household income.
You raised an issue, you touched on an issue, especially about the long-term planning. I understand Mr. Mbaram is with us again. Well, Mr. Mbaram, you spoke to planning, long-term planning. Well, you have had a challenge. You have heard someone who practices in the small and medium enterprise space in Nigeria talk about the challenge of sustainability of long-term plans. What's your take?
No, without a doubt, he's correct. We have a deficit in terms of our ability to consistently implement, development plans. And the focus needs to be, I must say, on infrastructure. Infrastructure, for me, is like, it basically is the galvanizer. Home and pop industries, MSMEs, they all need power, primarily speaking. If you have power in this country, consistent power supply in this country, the economy itself could, has the potential or
Mr.
the capacity.
Baram, we hear that, okay? But the challenge of long-term planning, and I think, that's one of the major challenges here. Government will say, this policy is government-enabled, private sector-driven, but then government seems to withdraw its enablement when there is a policy somersault, or to use the word that Mr. Shibok used here, policy reversal, based on the whims of one government official or one individual somewhere and all of that. You've heard of all of his examples. And you also happen to work with government. So in terms of the sustainability of long-term plans, especially the ones that government expects private investors to bring in money investing, what do they do if there is no assurance that that investment is going to last?
So capital will always go to where it is comfortable, however you want to look at it. That's why we've lost so many businesses to the countries like Ghana, for instance. And I was trying to make the point that comfort for capital is predominant in your planning ordinarily, in terms of the ability to bring in sustainability. So if you have government actively working against business interests, whether they say so or not, but it is clear by force of how they even manage the business of governance, then we are basically, undermining ourselves. And I keep making this point that the end result is supposed to be our means of grading ourselves. It's not what we say, but what the outcomes are. So if your numbers are clearly showing that you're in the deficit, you've got to be sincere enough to realize that you're not doing stuff right, and you need to tweak it. Coming back to policy, sustainable policy presupposes that the government incoming understands the benefits of the policy that is in existence. But you cannot take it away from it's the power of the system, how the constitution is contrived. The man who's coming into office would want to at least deliver stuff that he can readily piggyback on, maybe for even his subsequent attempts to return to office. So it would now need an institutional intervention. For instance, I'll take you back to the 2011 to 2015, agricultural policy, what we call the Agricultural Transformation Agenda, the ATA, under current president of the African Development Bank, then Minister of Agriculture. But that policy, is internationally renowned. It succeeded, even though it was not perfect. But by the time we had a change in government, we had a new minister who basically just decided not to adhere to it and chose to do a different thing. Today, we can see the impact, and we're now working backwards to begin to reconnect with the core of that policy. All right. So now, just to come back to it, we've got to utilize what we have to get what we want. So the legislature, for instance, needs to be more active, because if we were to have legislations on the existing policies, particularly those that we consider to be strategically important to the development of the nation, then we could lock those policies in, understanding our dynamics. And I come back to the book, by Professor Banji, From Consumption to Production. It's a Bible, because it clearly details Nigeria's efforts, at becoming a production economy. Though, frustrating as it might appear, we basically have kept coming back to the same, lessons, or will I say, mislearnings, time and again. But we still have the best opportunity is now to rework this, to change our approach and our disposition to governance.
We've lost him again. Dr. Carey, in all of this, no matter how beautiful our policies are and all that, the engine room that drives those policies, which is the civil service, we need to look at. They are so infamous now that they are even referred to as the evil service. And all attempts to reform that service have proved practically, impossible. So how far can we go with all this development and growth and all that without the input of the civil service?
It's an arm of government that is fundamental catalyst in the growth or development of any nation. One, it needs to be professionalized. Two, they should be paid very well. Compensation need to be clearly, be able to take them home, as the saying goes, and you'd find quality. The problem is that if you change the civil service, and they know, as Dr. Bashibagu mentioned, that they are more about going in there to become gatekeepers, then we will have a problem. Because you can be the private sector CEO or whatever, trying to develop and grow the business, but we'll find you. You'll come to the intersection. You'll come to the gate, and So essentially, there has to be a mindset shift. One, two. I believe that there has been a lot of reports. Orosoyan report is something that has been so famous. When it came out, everybody held on to it. I thought that it would be implemented that year that report came. How many years ago was that?
12, 11?
On that, we had a conversation earlier.
And is that the decision-making process in Nigeria?
Just on that
you have something and then it will take you more than 12 years to do it?
On that same,
Come
Dr.
on.
Bukar,
yes.
We have had reports. This may come to you as a surprise. I know it doesn't really.
Yeah.
The first civil service or public service reform project in Nigeria was in 1934.
Correct.
Between 1934 and 1960, we had 11 commissions.
But the thing is that civil service...
we're still looking at the same thing.
But the civil service of Nigeria in those days were professionals.
Yes, they were.
Alice and Aida, all of those, even as a young child, where my parents worked as civil servants, there was professionalism.
So how come the
only industry in the Northeast, Ashaka Cement Factory, was a project that my dad handled. As a kid, I remember. The thing is that they did it as a service, but they were well compensated. So, what today one would call middle class or upper middle class. Yeah. Now, there is no need to do anything but to serve and move on. Now, what had happened and historians have different interpretation. I think the military incursion into the body politic of Nigeria changed the dynamics of the professionalism of civil service. Mm. Our civil servants are no different from, say, a nation like Singapore, where it's also a former British colony, that had civil servants that up to today are professionals. In fact, young people, first-class graduates in universities in Singapore, would rather actually go and serve in the civil service than go into the private sector. Do you know why? They're better paid. I repeat it, they are better paid. Now, why is that? It's because they have the sense of higher productivity. Year on year, they're more productive than the previous 5, 8, 10 years back. And that changes. Whereas, can we say that about ours?
So how do we reverse that? Because one of the ways that I look at it, when we employ a president in Nigeria, we're employing him into at least 1,000 jobs, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
I tell you why. There are a number of ministries. Under those ministries, we have departments. Under those departments, we have agencies.
Correct.
And the president is going to appoint the heads of those boards, the members of the boards of the organizations, the managing directors, and those that are to be appointed, and all of that. So that's 1,000 jobs at least. And these people, are, from what you're saying now, are not well paid. How in the universe
Can we do anything?
is the president going to achieve anything?
And in fact, this is actually a fantastic conversation. I've said that many, many times. If we are copying something, we better copy it to improve upon it. That's the concept of innovation that I highlighted earlier. Now, we're copying from the Americans, right? When the American president is hiring the equivalent of a minister, he has a transition team that picks 6, 7 candidates for every slot, interview them, screen them before they select one person. It's not given. Have we ever had any parastatal or any ministry whereby any of our presidents since 1999 have interviewed a candidate for a slot? I mean, you're the journalists. Have you ever reported anything like that? None. Kim, who later on became the World Bank president, Obama interviewed him. He said for him to impress Obama, he read the PhD thesis of Obama's mom. He said, that's how you get your job, you know? But the game, yeah, the serious part about it is that that's a developmental economics paper. And he was a PhD developmental economist. Yeah. So he's competent to be in that job. But to add to the icing on the cake, he proved to the son that he had read the mother's PhD thesis. Now, how can you reject somebody who had read your mom's write-up? I mean,
decades before.
Decades before, you know? Yeah. So the game is that this is, we need to change our mindset. We need to have a paradigm shift. And if we want to professionalize the civil service, we have to take some bitter pills, shed the dead weights, restructure, put it in a better shape. Long term, it will be for the benefit of, if not ourselves, at least our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah. Mr. Ashibo, we have raised a number of issues here. And the reason for all of these are not far-fetched. Employment figures are abysmal. Revenue figures are abysmal. Inflation figures are regrettable. Poverty figures... The figures are not just...
Can you find a word to describe that?
I don't want
the poverty figures
are poor.
Yeah.
So, and there are those who have pointed to the fact that in the years where Nigeria was industrialized, we had it better. How do we reverse our industrialization fortunes? We have spoken about a number of things, but it would seem like, and I hope we still have, we'll have Dr. Mbaram, Mr. Mbaram back, because he was speaking to that book that Professor Ibanji, did. How do we begin to reverse our industrialization fortunes and bring back those industry practitioners, leaders that have since left?
Well, for me, you're not reversing anything. You're not going to reverse. You're going to think of an innovative way forward, because some of those industries will not be relevant in today's economics. You're not going to compete favorably with anybody in terms of fabrics. Right now, if you start the fabric industry, you're not going to. China has built a very big market of dependence around the world. So you need to ask yourself.
Suppose you shut your borders.
No, if you shut, you're just shooting yourself in the leg.
Okay.
We shut our borders for how many years? What's the outcome? No, let's be fair. Let's be honest. I don't believe in certain measures that people carry on to say that that's the way you need to go about it. Yeah, China did shut its borders. This country did that. No, how did they do that? And at what time? Are you shutting borders post-COVID? I mean, you should be a realist. You should face facts. You should match your figures with your reality. At the moment, you can barely generate up to 4,000 megawatts of electricity. The guys who are even off-grid can give you up to 8,000 megawatts. So the issue is, if you're going to talk about reversal, it's like taking 10 steps backwards also. Okay. Because you are not going to be competitive. What you need to look at is to ask yourself, in what sector or industry do you want to play in now that will make you significantly relevant and get a lot of people out of the poverty line?
So which industry would you recommend for Nigeria to look at?
Look at, we've had some milestones in the services sector and also in the area of ICT. You could play that area and ensure that you have more funds sitting in your country, which you could deploy, for example, into agriculture, not just agriculture in terms of production. You're talking about in terms of processing, and then look at how you can generate funds from exports. Being competitive, having a proper framework for quality infrastructure. That's what we're saying. If you have quality infrastructure for all organizations to latch on, people will run the process for you.
Mr. Shivago, funds from export, what would we be exporting? I remember when Babangida first came and he said, remember that slogan, export to survive?
Right.
And I was trying to export shrimps. My shrimps were at the airport and customs asked me for bribe. And I quoted export to survive to them. And they said, Madam, be speaking grammar, your shrimp go there for tarmac by tomorrow morning.
Your shrimp is likely to get expired there.
Exactly, on the tarmac.
You could also recall that some persons tried to export yams recently.
So what would we be exporting?
Okay, the thing is, that's why I said, if you have quality infrastructure in place, you will not have a customs asking you such questions. Because the system will be simply automated. If a system is automated, who is going to ask you for bribe?
Correct.
The system would process and give you a document. You see, and it will go through the quality assurance processes that is required by the experts. You don't need these third parties. You get to the airport, people are still doing things manually where you have digital frameworks and platforms at the same airport. Someone comes into the country, you are asking me to bring a print copy of a COVID certificate where there's a scanner for it. That tells you the lacuna between that person's competency
mindset
and the infrastructure that's available. Now, why we're saying this is, you see, when you develop a quality framework, it's about building skill sets for people and making them relevant. So you'll find customs just there for compliance. And if they are there for compliance, it means that they will only raise flags where questions need to be asked.
But before we can get to that point, we have to address what Dr. Buka said about paying the civil service bill, because these customs officers themselves are civil service, right?
Correct, all of them.
But the joke is on us. You spend. No, you see, the joke is on us. Look at our budget. Recurrent expenditure is now accounting for close to 40%.
Right.
And out of that 40%, 90% of it is on salaries. And you recall there's an acting accountant general who has been removed, who alluded to the fact that you need to borrow to pay the civil service for that same meager salary. So where are you going to even get the funds? The thing is, even if you say you need to prune the civil service by what some governors are alluding to, which I don't subscribe to, you will see also how going to spend money on severance packages. And it's not sustainable to maintain persons on pension from the age of 50 and above, when you know that they are productive. The truth remains that we've had an over-bloated service system. A lot of people need to be placed in where they will be productive as civil servants. And civil service is supposed to be a backbone for any economic development if you have proper persons who are shaped in policy making. Because the policies the civil service develops builds a country.
Right.
Look at Britain, for example. Look at Singapore. Look at countries that have developed milestones from nothing to something. It's policy frameworks that they develop that enables the private sector to run effectively. And they are not rent seekers. No, you can't. Let's give an example. You live in Abuja and you pay a rent of 15 million naira as a civil servant, and your annual pay package is not up to 1 million.
How?
And you expect that person to operate within the framework of the civil service? Are we kidding?
Okay, good question. Well, Mr. Mbaram, you were trying to make a point the other time. We're drawing closer to solutions now. And you alluded to Prof's book, and I don't know if you may want to speak, to it, because one of the #1 challenges we have as a nation is that of revenue. The finance minister said as much. We have to borrow to service our borrowing.
loans.
I don't even know if that makes any sense to me. But there are those who believe, economists, some of them here, that if we are able to shore up production, and as Mr. Ashibok said, export, then we'll be able to hopefully trap some funds within the country, and we will do less of spending. We'll be able to, have a lot more resources to do stuff that we need to do. What's your take on all of these? Talking solutions now.
Yeah, so I just would, can you hear me, please?
We can hear you, go ahead.
Fantastic. So I'll just allude to chapter 11 of the book, From Consumption to Production by Professor Banji Oyelaran-Oyeyinka. I mean, he starts that chapter with a quote: "We can chart our future clearly and wisely only when we know the path which has led to the present." That's from a quote from Adlai Stevenson. And in all sincerity, I'm an advocate for, change, but sincere change hinged on a proper understanding of your situational realities. How do you explain that Nigeria, even at a time when some countries of the world were making a killing from petroleum product export, is in a situation now where we gain from primary production or export of crude oil, and then we lose out because we're importing, finished products, petroleum products? It should be an issue for us to really, really, take our time to appraise. And if you cannot, be sincere enough to address your problem as it presents itself, then you are only running around in circles, and you will continue to come back to that point time and again, which is the experience that our economy and our nation has had over time. Professor Banji clearly details that, but he prefers solutions. And he says, look, we need to be sincere about how we are configured institutionally. And someone, the MSME colleague, I think that's Dr. Achiko,
yes, mentioned
this. We can't have. I'll give you an instance. The lady was talking. Your colleague was talking about exporting something previously. But let's work in the recent times. Zobo, hibiscus. You bring it from Kano into Lagos. It arrives. Welcome. This is Lagos, where you have the Ogun State border. It arrives there in 3 days. From that point to the point where you put it on, the ship, it takes you almost 90 days, if not more. By the time it gets there, the quality of the hibiscus has more or less depreciated, and it cannot meet international standards. We've had rejections, resulting from this scenario I just painted now. So these redundancies in the system have got to be addressed and addressed frontally.
The question then is how. You heard Dr. Buka talk about that as well. And everyone here has spoken about that. So the question is how. He spoke about, you heard Dr. Buka talk about the need to re-engineer the civil service, the larger system that runs the engine of government, of the policies and all of that. So the question is how? How do we do what you're recommending?
So we will need to appraise our ground norm, which is the Constitution, and it has to be sincerely appraised to see whether we are devolving powers in excess to specific, arms or offices of government. We need to also look at we should also appraise the global trends and realities at the present time. The colleague was talking about it. You cannot shut your borders. It's not possible. But you can also appreciate how development is trending and markets are trending globally, so as to be able to structure your economy in such a way as to benefit from those trends. If you have, for instance, a population that is in excess of 200 million people, it should be there should be a way of working around that to make sure that that population becomes an advantage rather than liability. Okay? You should also ensure that your existing competencies, particularly as it was stated, ICT and all of that, your youth populace and their ingenuity, which is already playing out in the activities of some of the people you call miscreants, the Yahoo boys. These are ingenious individuals, in all honesty. And that is in itself a pointer to the fact that if we were to targetedly, develop, provide opportunities for our young people, they would in themselves, be more of solutions rather than constitute problems to us.
Okay.
At the end of the day, and as Professor Banji alluded, we've got to get serious. Lee Kuan Yew, somebody talks about Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew, the father of Singapore, wrote a book, From Third World to First World. I would recommend us to read that. In addition, hello, can you hear me, please?
Yeah, in addition,
yes, in addition to Professor Banji's book, we should read the book of Lee Kuan Yew. The reason is, it talks about Nigeria. There's a part that talks about Nigeria, where Lee Kuan Yew indicated that he was in Nigeria and met with our minister, Okotie-Eboh, way back. And the minister who was in charge of the economy was talking about banning importation of shoes because he had set up a tannery, a shoe factory. And Lee Kuan Yew documented in his book, he said he went to bed that night understanding that these are a different set of people operating by different sets of rules. Today, Singapore is what it is, Nigeria is where it is. So it tells you that we need to be real, we need to be strategic, we need to be sincere in addressing our problems. We can't continue to pretend that there is no elephant in the room. We've got to point to it. Okay. And that's my take.
Okay. Dr. Kerry, we're talking about how to boost the revenue now. We can't talk about this without bringing up the issue of subsidy. I mean, if we're thinking about 6 trillion in subsidy for next month, for next year, then we do have a big problem, haven't we? How are we going to go about getting rid of this famous subsidy?
What do we normally do when we want to buy something and we cannot afford it?
We save.
We save, or we don't buy it at all.
We suspend the thought.
We suspend the thought.
Kill it.
So as a nation, we need to also think like families. It's a combination of families that come up and become a nation. If we cannot afford something, why do we think that we can do it? That's what that fuel subsidy is. It's not helping anything or anybody for that matter. It only helps the people that bring in those fuel
products
because they know that there is a gap between how much they have paid and how much they are going to recover from government as their reimbursement. So apart from those few, the nation is not better for it. So the fundamental thing, let's not even talk about the revenue. The revenue is about tax collection and all of that. We need to be more efficient and so on and so forth. But we need to block the leakage. And that is whether it is fuel subsidy, anything that has to do with consumption subsidy. I think it is the book that Mark just mentioned about, Prof's book. It's just that. It literally spells it out for us. And there is no way out. Okay. My only concern is that maybe it is because of being a political season. People are not saying what needs to happen.
We always
needs to be done.
But we have to bite the bullet and move on.
Okay, now there's something Mr. Ashibogu said the other time that I'd like you to speak to. The role of subnationals, states.
Yeah.
Most of the time when we talk about development, growth, production-driven growth and all, we look at the federal government. But then that's not to say that the states do not have a role to play. I don't know of many states, but I am aware that there is such a plan, a 25-year plan in Lagos, for instance, that, okay, this plan is going to go X number of years, and if you follow it, so, it's going to end up in so and so way. I don't know if you see that as something that needs to be replicated across all the states. Then also speak to, I'm sorry, it's a bouquet of questions.
Correct.
Also speak to the regional regional advantages. In the First Republic, we had, I think, 3 main regions, and they had their jobs, so to speak, cut out for them. I remember I saw a document produced by Leke Alder, who also talked about regional advantages that the various regions of the country has. Trade and commerce, he gave, I think, to the southeast, southwest, I think, had agriculture, and so on and so on and so forth. And there is a region for adding value to agricultural produce and all of that. So the states and the regional collaborations, the challenges, long-term planning. What's your take? How do we begin to look at these issues?
So it's actually so many things at once. But
yes.
But the fundamental thing is that, as you've stated, the focus always had been at the federal level, at the center, and the reason is that they are the most visible because they have all the state governors go there every month to collect their pocket money or whatever, and go back. But seriously speaking, it is not what you would expect. But the expectation, though, is that every state, being an economy on its own, need to be looking at its economic trajectory or growth trajectory. And being also from zones, since we have now created what is called the 6 geopolitical zones, there is also a comparative advantage that they can mine amongst themselves and then be able to come as a block to do certain things that one state cannot do. But if 6 of you or 5 of you come together, you would be able to afford to do that. Even energy, even production of electricity, for example, because it's a catalyst for development. And many other things that you could put your resources together to come as a block and build it. There is none. And the thing is to think outside of the box, to be innovative, to find new ways of doing things. Those are the combined factors that can change the trajectory. There is NDDC, there is NEDC, there is, many of those. But those are all driven by the federal government. What I would want to see is to see 5, 6, 4, 3 state governors coming together to form an economic bloc, so to speak, or an industrialization block, and then begin to invest in a location common to all of that, and see how it will affect that state, those states' fortunes.
Just a very quick one, 30 seconds.
Yes.
Is that, because I know you are aware of the SAPs, the AFDB's special agro, is that something in that region?
That is something you tap. That's an external source. Okay. But what I'm talking about is
for
to
the
put
governors
together,
to
come together to say, look, for example, if you look at just the internally generated revenues of Lagos, Ogun, Oshun, just the boundaries, right? And if you decide to say, we're going to put together commodities exchange, commodities processing, whatever, all these things that each state is trying to do, like a cargo, air, whatever. No, let's do it as a one entity where we all share. It's a shared services.
Absolutely.
Because you have mega resources, you combine your resources, pull it, and it can be a dynamic force. Absolutely. In that export-driven productive
economy. Are busy competing with each other, you see.
Well, maybe
so that might be a tall.
It could be it could be co-opetition, We cooperate to compete.
We have to thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of our conversation this morning. Kerry Bukai is a former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group and is managing director and CEO INLAC's Africa Operations. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Monday Ashibogu is a former spokesman of the National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
As well as Richard Mark Mbaram, who joined us virtually from Abuja. He's an international development practitioner. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Pleasure. As well.
Well, that said, that done, we go on to something that hopefully will help you think better. Mental health. We'll be back.